Hello, everybody. My name is Melody Rose, and I'm an extension agent in Northeast Tennessee in Greene County. So living in Northeast Tennessee has provided lots of opportunity to explore the mountains and see what plants are growing native to this area and be able to kind of expand on the utilization of those plants and incorporate those into the home garden and landscape. And from there, we get so many different kinds of herbal treats that we can use besides just our typical culinary uses. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I just ask that you do remember that when we talk about herbs, we are talking about lots of different uses. We have to bring in that historical component because we know that when the Native Americans were walking freely here on U.S. soil long before colonization, they were using these plants growing in our mountains and valleys as medicinal or as medicine for whatever ailed them at the time. They passed along that information to the colonists, to the settlers that inhabited this area all across the state of Tennessee. But do remember, we're not going to speak specifically to the medicinal uses, but I want you to know that that is why we know the power of many of these plants is because of those historical origins. So just kind of keep that as a frame of reference as we move through. Now, in essence of time, we're not going to have or be able to spend a lot of detail on specific plants because I want to show you some things that you can utilize these plants for later. And I do some extra classes on this as well, so feel free to check that out if you're interested in this type of methodology. So just a few favorites to get us started. This is one probably many of you know as the calendula or the pot marigold. This is one that has actually been used as poor man's saffron. If you've ever used saffron in cooking, you know how expensive that is. So this is one that is going to impart that same delicate flavor to some of those Indian and curry dishes or any kind of dish that you're using saffron for. And it's really easy to grow. Plus it has many other great benefits as well. This is a plant that you either love or you hate. This is cilantro. Some of us are actually born with that gene that gives us the predisposition to it tasting like dish soap, and I am one of those. But I also recognize and appreciate this plant because it does have a dual purpose. So from here you can see the foliage, and that's going to be utilized in a lot of our Mexican and Thai dishes. But then this also produces a spice for which we know as coriander that can be used in a lot of our Indian curry dishes as well. This is lemon balm. That's what we know it here in the U.S., but it is Melissa officinalis, and it actually goes by Melissa in the United Kingdom. But we do call it lemon balm, and just so you all know, Melissa is actually the Greek word for bee, and then balm is actually a derivative from the word balsam, which actually refers to that aromatic and healing property of the plant from those oils and resins from those leaves. Kind of in the same line with lemon balm because lemon balm is a mint, so you have to contain it or otherwise it can't take over the universe. But we have peppermint and spearmint. Both are going to have unique benefits. Peppermint has a little bit more potency, and we know that we see these products used all the time in toothpaste, mouthwash, chewing gum. But they, again, are both mints, so they can get a little rowdy and get out of hand, so you have to contain those. Just be aware that they can almost be invasive. If you don't want them to be aware of that. Rosemary is going to be one of those that we know and love in our meat dishes and use it as a seasoning in a lot of culinary recipes. But it is a really good alternative to caffeine in just regards to sniffing the plant, the aromatic compounds of this plant. It has also been said to enhance energy. It's going to sharpen the memory, and then it also helps stimulate optimism just by smelling the fragrance of this woody perennial. This is one of my favorite plants that kind of resurfaced and came to the forefront in 2020, thanks to one of the master gardeners here in the Big Spring group. She actually did a presentation on this plant, mullein, which is known as one of nature's first toilet paper. So when we hit the shortage last year, we had a really good laugh out of this plant because, as you can see from those big old leaves, it was in fact one of the first plants used for that purpose. This is one we all probably recognize and love. Thyme, we're going to be able to utilize that in a lot of different culinary dishes as well. But it's also used in a lot of bath and body products too. Lavender is going to be one that we recognize as almost a sleep inducer, relaxation plant. We use it a lot in sachets, eye pillows. We're using those dried flower buds even in culinary dishes like ice cream and lemonade. So many different uses for lavender. Plus, it's just a pretty plant to have growing in your garden. This is chamomile, and probably one of its most unique properties is that its blossoms smell very much like apples. And of course, chamomile is going to be known for having that relaxation effect on us as well. You know, sipping the chamomile tea before we go to bed at night to kind of help soothe our nerves. So great plant to have in the garden. Oregano is going to be one of those like thyme. It was known as the mountain of joy plant in Greek, just because they would smell that and it would impart, again, just happiness. Hence the name Mountain of Joy. Also used in skincare products. This is going to be pepper. This is cayenne. Most of us probably would classify it as herb, but technically it can be. It's going to be used for many different ailments, specifically circulation. If you make your own cough syrups, this is going to be one of the ingredients in fire cider. And again, I have information on some of this when I do other classes. So if you're interested in this type of thing, we'll kind of expand on that later in the season as we move into fall and winter. Kind of in that same vein would be garlic, because we do know that Hippocrates said, eat thy medicine, and he was referring to this plant because it can really help stimulate and turn on that immune system and gives a really good response. Plus it serves as a great beneficial plant in the garden, or a companion plant in the garden, because it is in the allium family. So its scent alone can help confuse insects and keep them away from other plants. Also known as a blood purifier. This one is one that many would consider a weed. This is plantain. We have many different species of plantain, but all of those are used as wound healers. We can use those in a salve, on bee stings, anything like that to reduce inflammation. So when you see this weed growing in your lawn, maybe think about it and be like, well, there might be some other uses for that plant that maybe I'm not necessarily aware of. Kind of in tandem with that would be chickweed. Many people hate this weed in the early springtime, one of those winter germinating annuals. But this is one that we can actually eat. We can make a chickweed pesto from that plant, and it can be quite tasty. And it's also going to be used in many of our over-the-counter bath and body products and makeup products for you ladies. This is one of the echinacea flowers, Echinacea purpurea. We do know that we have a native species here in Tennessee, the Echinacea tennescensis, but echinacea has always been, well, since the early 1920s, is one of those to be able to relieve anxiety. Plus, it's just an excellent pollinator plant as well. So also known as the plant that will cure whatever ails you. So lots of many beneficial properties. This is yarrow, depending on how you pronounce that, whatever region you're from. But this was also known as a blood-stopping agent by the Native Americans. And it's one that we've been, well, not we, me per se, but there's been a lot of studies conducted utilizing this plant from the pharmacopoeia world. So lots of different isolates have been pulled out of this plant in that regard to being used as a blood clotting agent. Here is one that has really grown in popularity. It can be very invasive though, because it's got a ginormous root system, but this is comfrey and it serves so many great beneficial purposes. You can see from the flower there, pollinators love it. This will come alive with bumblebees in early spring because it is one of the first to bloom. But it's also really good to crush up these leaves and just make a little poultice and put on a bruise. It'll pull that inflammation right out of the skin. Because of its massive root system, it will mine for secondary nutrients in the soil, so you can actually harvest this plant, just cut it almost off at the ground and use that in your garden to feed the garden. And then it's just going to profusely continue to bloom throughout the season. So you can just keep chopping it off. It's going to bloom again. Put it on your garden, put it in the compost pile to help speed up that process. This is a plant that the Native Americans loved, especially for women's ailments. This is the black cohosh, also known as skunk plant or snake root, because they would utilize this plant as a snake bite antidote. But it's anything that ails a woman, this plant has been known to help cure. Turmeric is one that we're starting to see folks grow here in Northeast Tennessee. Of course, it has to be dug up in the fall, but this is going to be the plant that imparts that bright yellow hue to mustard. But we know that this is a spice that has great anti-inflammatory benefits, and it's used in a lot of over-the-counter bath and body products, also used for tea, lots of different uses for this plant. Now, as we move into how to utilize some of these in our home garden landscapes and homesteads, again, many of us are going to think about those culinary uses, and there are several. So just to kind of hit on some of those, we can utilize a lot of these herbs that we grow in vinegars. We can also use those in jellies, jams, and syrups. Even red bud blossoms can be used to make a syrup or a jelly. Elderflowers, lots of different uses. So you really have to think out of the box on how to use some of these herbs. Compound butters are really tasty additions, especially with corn on the cob coming on this season, baked potatoes. This one in particular is lovage, which imparts a really delicate, almost celery-like flavor. Really easy to make. You're just mixing the fresh herbs with butter or cream cheese, either one. Pesto, we kind of already hit on that, but basil's not the only plant you can use that, use with chickweed, cilantro, lots of different plants, just kind of depending on your preference. We can also utilize these herbs to make salts, different flavored salts, rosemary salt, lemon verbena, kind of depending on, again, on your taste buds. And in that same vein, we can take flower petals or the dried flowers, dried buds, and make sugars, which are really nice when we're baking. You just infuse the sugar like you see here and keep that shaken up for a couple of weeks, and it's going to impart a really delicate sweet flavor. We can also take sprigs of herbs or fruit and make ice cubes to make really pretty cocktails or drinks, as you can see there. And in that same vein, again, we can make our own infusions for flavored cocktails, as you see pictured here. We can just infuse some of those herbs in vodka and make really nice syrups or cocktails from that. We can also do the same with oils. Now we can do culinary oil or we can do bath oil, a little bit different process involved with that. But a lot of these, again, we can infuse in oil for a really nice, delicate or even strong flavor, depending on our preference. Taking that a step further, we can use those vinegars and oils to make salad dressings. And then maybe one of my favorites would be the herb-infused honey. Many different herbs that we can infuse our honeys and then in turn use to sweeten our tea. And this is actually a sun tea. We can take all kinds of different plants out of our garden, the lemon balms, the echinacea, and make teas. So the possibilities for tea are just really endless. Now, as we take that a step further, and you've heard me mention Bed Bath and Beyond already, but we do have those oils that we can actually steep and make for certain bath oils. So keep that in mind, especially you see the calendula there. It's a great plant to have for eczema or any of those external skin rashes. You can make an herbal hair rinse. We can even make bath soap utilizing herbs. Or what about perfume? You can actually make your own perfume using some of the essence of these flowers. Bath salts. So we can infuse salts for our cooking, but we can also make those bath salts for the bath. And same with sugar scrub. Same property there. Sugar is going to serve as the carrier to help exfoliate and moisturize, and it's going to help remove that dead skin. So if we include some of our herbs as the aromatic therapy, it makes a really nice bath bath scrub. Same with body butter. We can make our own creams to utilize, and chapsticks or lip balms. When we think about those sleep pillows, and of course we think about lavender. Some people will call these dream pillows, little sachets that we can make. We can also make our own candles utilizing these herbs. And we can even make the liquid candles using the oils or the room fresheners like you see here, and actually combine multiple different fragrances. We can take dryer sheets and actually infuse those with some of these herbs from our gardens, or we can actually make cleaning essentials like you see here, some kind of household spray, and it's all natural and has its own antiviral, antiseptic, antiviral, antibacterial properties. But not only that, in the kitchen or in the bath, we can also use herbs for other purposes, like as fire starters. Save your toilet roll holders, bunch up a bunch of these dried herbs, and they're going to be really fragrant. Or as you can see here with the egg cartons, we can do that as well. You can even make your own Altoids, y'all. We talked about peppermint a little earlier. So how great would that be to grow your own peppermint and make your own Altoids? Really cool, literally. Of course, we can make potpourris, different ways that we can make the potpourris. It's not only beautiful like you see here, but can also be very fragrant, and you can use your own blends kind of depending on what you prefer. Of course, decoration for any season. Of course, this is going to be one kind of for this season here as we are moving into the summer months. But if you have chickens, also you can grow herbs, you know, or you can place those herbs in their nesting boxes, because we have that terminology, strewing herbs, that we would actually use on dirt floors years ago to help cleanse the area and make it smell a little bit more fragrant. But if you're placing those herb sprigs in the nesting boxes, it's going to help keep unwanted pests away as well, and it'll just keep your chickens healthier. So when we talk about all these herbs that we're growing in our backyard gardens or landscapes and our homesteads, we have to think about preservation techniques, and there's a lot of simple solutions that we can provide for that. Again, an herbal tea is one way to be able to preserve a lot of those. You can make teas or infusions, and you're just boiling the stems or the leaves or the roots, flowers, and then you just allow that to, to cool. So you can utilize what's fresh or actually dry that and store in an airtight container and use for later. This is what we call a poultice, and these are going to be external applied remedies that you're drying those herbs, and you're using it as a first aid treatment for aches and pains. And you can kind of see how that's done here. And many what I refer to as old timers would do this even on their chest, to kind of like modern day Vicks Sad, to be able to breathe and release that congestion as well. Bee stings, putting one of these poultice over a black eye to reduce inflammation. Lots of different uses for those herbs. Poison ivy, we can use this in a bath salt to help relieve some of that. Jewelweed is one of those as the antidote for poison ivy, so we can make that into a cream or a salve or a bath salt like you see here. We can also use salt as a method of preservation. So when we talk about salt, we think about that in the context of pioneers and the people who didn't have refrigeration or freezers, and that kind of carry over to modern day with our homesteaders, because they're still utilizing this method just to preserve some of those herbs like you see there with the dill, and it can preserve it for quite a lengthy time. You can also create your own facial steams. This is just a beauty treatment that can help with skin irritation. Again, calendula is going to be one of those that comes to the forefront of my mind. But steam facials can also help with even any type of breathing ailment as well. And then, of course, freezing. I'm not going to go into all of this in essence of time, but freezing and drying are going to be on par for utilizing a lot of these herbs. We want to make sure that when we're harvesting, we're doing it at the right time of day. UVs from the sun and any type of moisture from the dew or the frost that can discolor or even severely reduce the quality of many herbs. So you want to harvest when the time is right. So you want to be harvesting or drying herbs in a large empty closet or attic or a room. You can even dry herbs just like this on a porch, or like this in a wreath, hanging those up. You can see they're using a drying rack, hanging them from the eaves in the barn, using any kind of mechanism that you can to be able to get those dried up, spaced out a little bit so they don't rot. Utilize a screen like you see here to dry those flowers. You can use paper bags like you see here. They're hung upside down using just grass string in a paper bag, and then those buds will actually fall into the bottom of this bag and protect it from any kind of dust. If you're going to be hanging for a long period of time, just take a hole puncher and punch holes in those bags. You can also dry in the microwave. It's really quick and easy, but there's a balance here. There's a fine line. So you really have to make sure you research how to do that properly depending on the herb, because it is going to be different for each one of those foliage, depending on the amount of moisture content and that kind of thing. We can also use the oven to dry, but we're going to have to really spread those out, dry those at the lowest temperature possible. Food dehydrators are going to serve that same purpose, but this is going to be an all-day job oftentimes if you have this many to do, because we don't want to overcook those because they, again, will lose their potency. When we get those herbs dried, then we want to store those in an airtight container. Number one tip, make sure they're completely dry before you store, otherwise they're going to mold. Number two, make sure they're completely sealed, and you can have fresh herbs. Even some of these herbs will last up to a couple of years. And you can just kind of see there how utilizing this probably in the short term. Doesn't have to be fancy to store these at all. And then one last thing, when we do talk about herbs, don't forget about them actually serving a useful purpose in the garden. That they can be companion plants. They can serve as an insectary for beneficial insects to come in and actually eat the bad bugs. They're going to serve as pollinators in your garden, which is going to be great. Get everything pollinated, all your veggies and your fruit crops and things like that. You're just building a biodiverse ecosystem when you incorporate these herbs, utilizing native species from your area in your landscape and being able to utilize those for so many different purposes, or using our traditional culinary herbs to be able to incorporate those throughout our garden. And I kind of like to say it's more bang for your buck because you're getting multi-purpose use out of all of these plants. And again, just to reiterate, we didn't have a lot of time to go into how to create some of these unique bath and body products or the culinary delights that I was talking about. But again, I do offer classes on that in the fall and the winter. So make sure that you check us out on the bsmga.com website. And if you have any questions, if this has stimulated any kind of question for you at all, feel free to reach out via my email that you see listed here on the screen. And I hope to see many of you down the road in the future. And I hope all of you are incorporating herbs in your gardens and landscape this season. So have a great day and a happy summer, and I will see you all soon.